Welcome everyone to another episode of Talk IES, this time dealing with legal solutions during the pandemic. I'm extremely excited to be speaking with Arlo Kipfer today, who is an attorney with Bricken and an international education legal specialist. Hi Arlo, how are you?
Hi Richard, I'm doing good. How about yourself?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks. Where are you today?
I'm in sunny Bogota, Colombia, which is probably unusual to say, but we have a really beautiful sunny day here today.
Very good. So thank you for giving up some of your time to speak to us today. How have you been with all the craziness of the pandemic in the past recent months?
Well, we've been managing. We just recently flew from small town Indiana in the States, where it wasn't too much of a problem. I mean, there were some restrictions, but population density is quite low, to landing in Bogota last Wednesday, and we're in the middle of a 14-day quarantine. Right. So it's going to be a bit of a change, but we're managing well.
Fun and games with the quarantine, yeah. So before I get into the questions, Arlo, please let me tell our audience a little bit about your experience. Arlo is originally from the United States. Arlo is now based in Bogota, as he said, where he advises clients on Latin America and China business issues. Before moving to Colombia, Arlo lived in China for almost 2 decades, guiding the development and compliance efforts for multinationals in Asia, Europe, and the Americas. In addition to his wide-ranging international practice, Arlo spends much of his time on international education issues. Arlo has advised clients on the establishment of several independent and joint venture international schools. Arlo is a strong negotiator in Mandarin, English, and Spanish. And we at IES are very happy to say that he is our legal counsel and provides a broad range of legal solutions to our school clientele. So first up, Arlo, how are you seeing COVID-19 impact K-12 international schools currently?
Well, Richard, what I'm hearing and seeing, and part of this is because my wife is also an administrator in international schools, and I have a lot of friends who are running international schools or who work there. What we're seeing is a loss of enrollment is kind of the first thing we're seeing, and especially among the expatriate student population. And the reasons for this are partially because some of the expatriate parents want to possibly stay in their home country during this time of the pandemic. Maybe there's some uncertainties, and there is some concern that the loss of expat students' enrollment might be permanent, which is a problem because, as you know, international schools get almost all of their revenue from tuition fees. So this is definitely affecting budgets and bottom lines. Another thing that we're seeing is affecting the ability to retain teachers. And really this happens in 2 ways. One is the teachers who were currently under contract there are some of them that have chosen, like the expat parents, student parents, to return back to their home country, and they want to break contract or somehow get out of what they were committed to doing. And because of the way international school world hires teachers, often many months, even maybe a year in advance, this is a challenge for schools. Another challenge is there's been countries where some international schools are located where teachers can't get in because that particular country is only allowing citizens or residents, and maybe these teachers are new and they don't have their visas yet. So the schools are, as you know, the start of the school year is imminent upon us very shortly, and teachers cannot get into the country. There's also another big challenge that we're seeing, and this comes up periodically whenever there's a crisis, is the international schools are usually registered as some type of private school in a country, and they usually have to navigate between the advice from the government health department, which is largely directed at local public schools, and trying to figure out if these directives apply to the international school or not. Right. Can they open? Are they required to open? If local schools are required to open, the methods for COVID prevention, do they have to copy the exact same methods, or can they use their own methods? And so schools are having challenges trying to navigate these directives. And then of course you see tuition rates can be a problem sometimes for some parents who see this expensive, maybe high-end tuition that they're paying to the international school, but the school's launching with either all online learning or maybe partial distance learning. And the parents feel maybe that the tuition should be discounted or refunded somewhat. And this is a huge challenge for international schools because, as you would know, they are already locked into several contracts, such as with their landlord to pay rent for the school building, if that's applicable. Also third-party vendors like school buses and lunch provision companies. that those local companies do not want to let the school out of the contract often. And so this is a challenge for a school how to deal with this.
Yeah. Thanks, Arlo. And just the other thing that a lot of people don't realize is that schools, as well as having commitments to landlords and suppliers, they've got these commitments on contract to their teachers. So,
Right.
you know, they've got to see that through for the rest of the year. So thinking about schools, of which there are many planning to bring their own school brand or setting up a sister school concept in another country, particularly here in Asia. What are some of the legal issues that these schools should be considering?
Well, if you're thinking about starting a sister school or a brand new brand of international school in another country, when I sit down with clients who are considering this, one of the first things I talk about is what is the correct legal form of school for your school to register? Each country has its own education regulations that how to license a school, and there are implications for each type of license. And every country does this differently. So, for example, you might have a country where if you license an international school, that means you cannot take any of the local population, that country's citizens, as your students. And if your goal is to enroll the local population, you wouldn't want to choose this form. There's other forms that are maybe have a certain quota or certain ratio of local students to foreign students, maybe 70-30, 60-40, really depends on this country and depends on maybe if the government gave you land or subsidized land purchase for the school. There's also forms that are profit or nonprofit. Really getting that correct legal form of the school is a key thing to consider. A big issue to consider in the area of reducing your overall risk exposure is to pick a good local partner. You want to select a local partner you want to select them for quality. Right. You want them to be very competent at being a partner to run a school, so they're not exhausting, the home side. You want them to bear their part of the burden. But more importantly is you want to know who they are. I've seen with international schools, it's very natural for this first connection between the school or the investor and the local partner to be made in a very informal manner. You see it, maybe they were they are a parent of a student at a private school in the UK or the US, or they're on the board, and they say, come start a school in my hometown in China or Vietnam or wherever. And or maybe I even heard one situation where administrator of a private school was on holiday, on vacation, and they met a local. And this local said, hey, you should bring your school to our country. So it's natural that these connections be made, but just because you know this person doesn't mean they're a great partner. And so what you want to do is you want to conduct due diligence on the partner. And due diligence really is a process where you look at, are they who they say they are? Are they a legitimate potential partner? Do they have legal problems or something that could tarnish the reputation of the home school or the home investment group? And then something that a lot of people don't consider, but is this partner part of the local government? And because if you come from a country with the Anti-Corruption or Anti-Bribery Act, like the UK or the US with the FCPA, right, what you will find is if your partner, oftentimes they're working for an education company, but the education company could be owned by the government. And then they're considered a state-owned enterprise. And if you were to give this individual a gift, and that gift met the definition of a bribe, which roughly means that it had nothing to do with any substance, it was meant to influence them. Right. You have basically, if this person is part of the government, you have now maybe naively bribed a foreign government official, and there's serious consequences for that. So you want to know who they are, who their shareholders of their company is, who the people you're dealing with. Our firm at Harris Bricken conducts background investigations that provide this information in a very cost-effective and efficient way. You just learn about your partner's financial health, their intellectual property registrations, and any lawsuits or fines they have. And it gives you a chance to make an informed comparison between this report and then what your understanding of the situation was. And then you can make this kind of educated decision on how to proceed. Besides due diligence on the partner, another big factor is due diligence on the proposed land side of the school. This always comes up, and usually the land shown to the school the party that's trying to start the school, the land looks great, but it's a foreign country, and most people are not very familiar with what the zoning regulations are in that country, and if a school can even be built there, no matter how great the land looks. So do due diligence on the zoning. I had a situation where 1 week before a new international school was going to start, we needed to get the school fire and safety certificate before the school could actually open. And because the school was built on non-education zone land, the certificate could not be issued. And you can imagine the pressure and stress this caused the school administration, as they had collected fees, they had everyone ready to go, the teachers were on the ground, 1 week before school start, can't open. So getting that zoning due diligence on the land is key. And then make sure your partner understands compliance. You may have an understanding that, of course, we should pay whatever taxes need to be paid in that country, but your partner may not have that same understanding. So do a good check on your partner. And then the last issue is really the structure of the deal. You should consider, how do you want this business arrangement between you and this new international school and your local partner to look? And there's really 4 main types of this. There's direct investment. You can do where you pour money into the country and you kind of own most or all of the school. You can create a franchise. It's very similar to a restaurant franchise where you're licensing your know-how, maybe your curriculum, your brand, and some training to somebody for a fee. You could do a cooperation agreement where you're basically like a joint venture. Your partners either equal or some agreed upon ratio. Or you could structure your deal around management fees, where you're paid fees for maybe royalties for your curriculum and your brand, or for the work you do hiring teachers for the school, things like that. And at Harris Bricken, we do advise clients on these kind of structures, like what kind of contract should you set up so that you have the right amount of control that you expect in the school. And how are you going to get paid, from the school? How does money make its way overseas? You don't want to enter into the deal and find out that the school says, hey, we don't know how to pay you.
Yeah.
We never thought about that. You also have things like, I've helped clients start a wholly owned foreign company or a joint venture company as kind of a business office. That's a local business office for the school. And then sometimes you need to set up, depending on the situation, you need to structure something offshore, like Hong Kong, Singapore, or Jersey or Guernsey, some type of company like that to help manage the school. And the final thing I forgot is you want to make sure you register your intellectual property. Since you're going into a new country or starting a new school, you register your intellectual property, your marks. It gives you an option in case someone copies your school or just steals it from you. And also, in many countries, if you have registered IP, it allows you to get paid royalties much easier.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, great advice. And I remember you always saying to me, are they who they say they are? Do they own what they say they own? And is their education vision sound? Which obviously in a lot of markets with curriculum restrictions and everything, you've got to be aware of as well. So with everything going a little crazy right now, to put it mildly, what are some of the legal issues a school currently operating internationally should be aware of and prepare for?
Well, if you're currently running an international school right now, I wish you the best. I have been impressed by the kind of collaboration that heads of schools are doing all across the world, and just the effort they're putting forth into plans, tackling this situation that they have to deal with. The good thing they've had the summer. A lot of them had the summer at least to work on it. I think in the spring it caught people off guard a bit. But yeah, I wish you my best. But if you're currently running a school, right now, the legal issues that I can think of, and to sum it up, is when times get tough, it's really important that your legal house is in order, because this will be, this will be one less huge weakness that will be exploited if you have some areas of risk. An example of this is when times are tough, legal issues become prominent. I worked in China for 13 years, and when I first came to China, tax laws were loosely enforced. And at one point, the revenue for local governments in selling land rights was halted, and the local governments needed money. And all of a sudden they said, hey, we have these tax laws, let's enforce them. The foreign companies and international schools who were already compliant had nothing to worry about. But the foreign international schools and the foreign companies who were not compliant, who weren't paying taxes, just like everyone else, it seemed like in China, they got in big trouble. So it's really important you get your legal house in order. And the main areas for this is to ensure that you're in compliance with your host country's employment and contract and education laws. A lot of times when international schools started, there's lack of clarity on how they should do things. Like, for example, local and expatriate staff, should we pay them locally or should we split their salaries? We'll pay part of them overseas. And and they may even get advice from accounting firms saying this is okay to do. Should you treat local and expatriate staff the same as far as taxes and social insurance benefits, pensions? Can you treat them differently or not? This is an area where you want to make sure that your original novel solutions that you came up with when you started the school are still legal today, because oftentimes the law has evolved, or maybe enforcement is stricter now. Then, of course, do you have good contracts? If there's a contract dispute, are your contracts good? Are they enforceable in your home country? Obviously, this comes about, contracts are usually not paid attention to much when there's no problem, but in a time of crisis where there's maybe some disputes, these issues are important. Are the contracts in the language of the host country, or are they in English or some other language? Are they bilingual? What should they be in? What language should they be in? What's enforceable? What kind of jurisdiction of the contract is optimal? Do you want to, and that really depends on the school. Do they want to make this contract enforceable against the other party, or do they want to avoid a lawsuit against themselves? And there's other factors too. Do you want to require, if there's a dispute, that the parties go into mediation, or do you want to require they go into arbitration, or do you want them to go straight to the local court, which is best in that country? It varies. And another thing is, we look at contracts is, are contract damages in there, in the contract? And some countries highly favor liquidated damages clauses. That just makes it easy for them to know what they should pay. But how much should the liquidated damages clause be? If it's too much, courts will throw it out as punitive. So making sure that your contracts are good is another way to make sure your legal house is in order. And then right now, I think there's some issues with local staffs. You referenced earlier teachers, but there's also local staff issues sometimes if enrollment drops severely. And what can you do with your local staff? What's legal in that country? Can you lay them off? Can you demote them? Can you terminate them? Can you make them, reduce them to part-time?
Yep.
Do you have to pay severance if you do any of these things? And what are the lawful procedures for that? So having your HR department ahead of the crisis, or ahead of when there's a dispute, or ahead of when there's layoffs, having them organized and knowing what's lawful in that country, and the admin team on board knowing what they need to do is a big thing. And then financial compliance is always an issue. Make sure you're getting proper audits. Make sure nothing comes back on the school in the UK or the US or wherever the home school is at, or the home investment group. You don't want legal liability coming back because you didn't pay taxes. And another way this shows itself, is I've seen this personally, is if you're the foreign legal representative of the international school, which oftentimes that's the head of school, you are responsible for whatever happened at that school, what's happening now and what's happened in the past. And I personally saw a head of school that was told he was going to go to jail for many years in a foreign country and be fined millions, or actually millions of the local currency, so hundreds of thousands US dollars, and because they didn't do things correctly in regards to taxes and sending for payments overseas. So you really, getting your legal house in order really means doing kind of a contract review and a legal risk assessment and of your school to see where the areas are that you need to kind of change and correct. And of course, at Harrison Bricken, we do these reviews for clients, dozens of countries all over the world. I've done them myself in dozens of international schools. And you want to do it with a lawyer that's proficient in the local language and the local regulations. Just basically get a substantive review of all the legal aspects of your school, and then recommendations how to address those aspects. And then most importantly, follow up on the advice that you've received. Do it. I've seen situations too where people got great advice and then it was too inconvenient, so they didn't want to follow through. Yeah. So that's my advice for people running schools now: get your legal house in order.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, get your house in order. I mean, we're seeing a lot of schools, particularly in tourist areas and other challenging parts of the market, that have got some challenges for sure. And yeah, getting your legal house in order, that's really good advice. So thank you so much for your time, and that's been great words of wisdom. and from you as usual.
Thanks, Richard.
Thanks for your contribution, and hope to see you in the not too distant future. Although with all the travel regulations, I think it's going to be a little hard for us to see each other face to face in the next while.
I think so.
But let's hope that's not too far away. So great, thanks for your time, and
my pleasure.
You take care there in Bogota. Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Richard.